Okay, let's get started. So good morning West Coast and good afternoon East Coast, and welcome to the second in our monthly Plus16 webinar series. Today we're going to delve into what SharePoint strategy is right for me. Before we get too far, I'm just going to confirm connectivity and technical setup. If anyone is having an issue, please drop a note in the chat. We've got someone monitoring that now. I'm going to talk briefly. What our format is today is we know you're busy, and so our goal is to be focused and to pack meaningful data into an efficient 30-minute window. So our presentation will last about 20 minutes, and then that'll leave us about 10 minutes for questions, and we will get everybody out of here on time. So as we're going along, if you do have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We'll also be recording this session, and so we can send you a link at the end. So my name is Kathy Dew. I'm the CEO and Information Architect for 2Plus2 Partners. I've also got my co-presenter today, Anthony Barada, who's the CTO for 2Plus2. So let's go ahead and get started. So who's the target audience and what are the expected outcomes for today? This webinar is for anyone that already has SharePoint or is seriously considering SharePoint as a solution for your intranet, team sites, which are typically internal, or project sites, which may include external access, document management, etc. At the end of this webinar, you're going to have a good understanding of the options of on-premise versus in the cloud versus what's now possible, which is a really finessed hybrid solution. And you'll be equipped with some key questions and decisions that your organization needs to make as part of determining which SharePoint strategy is right for you. So I think we're ready to get started. So the first question is, why ask this question now? And the answer is SharePoint 2016 and Office 365 is actually a matured product. So the big news was just yesterday, May 2nd, SharePoint 2016 was made available for Microsoft Developer Network subscribers, which we are one of. So we now have downloaded our copy of 2016. We haven't done much with it yet in our whole day. And also to volume license subscribers. So for many medium to large size companies, SharePoint's been installed on-premise for potentially a lot of years. SharePoint's been around for quite a while. 2016 is the 6th release of SharePoint, which goes back to 2001, and there's been a new release every 3 years. I will say that one of our early encounters with SharePoint was actually a beta release quite a while ago, and we ended up having to bail on that project because we couldn't quite get the software to work. I'm happy to report that SharePoint has really come a long way in its lifetime. So 2007 was released in 2006, 2010 came out in 2010. The first Office 365 was in 2011. And that actually had a SharePoint 2010 interface for the SharePoint Online component of Office 365. 2013 came out in 2012, and then Office 365 upgraded to the 2013 interface for SharePoint Online in 2013. So now here we are with Office 365 and SharePoint Online as a product offering. It's robust and it's affordable with the subscription model. So now with this complete offering, the barriers between SharePoint Online and Office, which often what you're doing in SharePoint is managing documents, those boundaries are really breaking down and there's much more finesse. They're really disappearing, making it a really credible user experience for your employees and staff. With the online version, both versions are getting updated about once a month, which means you don't have to stop and worry about upgrades anymore. So really, this offering has provided an affordable path to bring SharePoint in-house. But with the commitment to Office 365 and SharePoint Online and the release of 2016, now's really a great time, and there are whole new models that have really opened up. So I want to talk a little bit about SharePoint 2016 and what's new in this release. There are a lot of end user features that are really speaking to the increased usability of the product. So one of the first things is site pages can now, keeping track of what sites you're part of or interested in has often been a big challenge and not very easy to be personalized for individuals. Now individuals have the ability to actually just pin the sites. You know, you see that little little push pin kind of icon that's in many online and social media properties. Now that's available. Similarly, you can actually pin documents, so you can keep track of those, which is a nice way to do it, kind of like your own little private favorites. Also within document libraries, there's a new detail pane, which shows information like properties, versioning, so you can see some of that information without having to dig into the document. There's a new grid view for documents, which is kind of nice to be able to see. And you can also download and upload files that are bigger than a gigabyte. Right?
Yes.
Yes, 2,047 megabytes. Sorry, technical help. There's also an image and video preview for any images and videos that are posted to a document library. Those get activated via hover or a click, but that's nice. There are also, as I was saying before, there are a lot of things that have smoothed out the UI between the Office 365 and SharePoint. So now there's an app launcher that allows you to quickly launch your apps directly from SharePoint. People with long file names or heavily nested folders will be happy that you can now have file names longer than 128 characters. As an information designer, I'm not sure I would recommend that, but it's possible now, so that's good. And you can also start using some of those reserved characters. Ampersand, the tilde, brackets can now be used in file names. Percents and pound signs are still out, but it's opened up quite a bit. So then there's also some enhanced document library in the UI. An individual document can now be synced or shared directly from that line, again, without having to go into the document. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tony, who's going to talk about some of the more technical aspects of new features in 2016.
Good morning, good afternoon. One of the nice things about the new SharePoint 2016, both for on-premise and the cloud, is Microsoft has extended a lot of the work that they've done managing documents. Starting with 2010 and moving on to 2013, Microsoft made a bunch of enhancements with the way that they stored, managed, and taxonomied documents. One of the biggest changes or additions that they've added in this round is sensitive information types. This allows you to data mine your documents looking for specific types of data like social security numbers, credit cards, and other types of sensitive information, so you can track, monitor, and verify that there is no data leakage as employees are using information and storing it in SharePoint, either on-premise or for the cloud. You can create patterns and rules to search for these types of documents and flag them appropriately. Additionally, there's centralized document deletion policies, which allow you to apply corporate-wide policies across all your SharePoint sites, both site collections on the cloud and on-premise, so that you have a standardized deletion policy. Challenges for some companies, both large and small, is deleting documents too soon or not deleting them at all, creating possible litigation risks. Additionally, we now have better in-place hold policy centers, and these templates and tools allow you to, again, extend corporate-wide, both internal on the on-premise and on the cloud, litigation and other types of searches and holds that you can put on your documents, and thereby having a standardized process for all of them. A couple other things that they've done on the back end for you is fast site collection creation processes, where instead of waiting for your site collections to be created over 5 to 15-minute periods, it now should be done under a minute. And lastly, something we've all been looking for is mail communication at the SMTP level is now encrypted. From a server standpoint, server administration standpoint, they've made also a lot of under-the-cover changes. What they've called it enhanced software boundaries. You now have your content database sizes can be in the terabytes versus the hundreds of gigabytes. Number of site collections now is over 100,000 versus 2,000. And your max file upload size has been increased to 10 gigabytes. Additionally, search indexing is now increased to 500 million items per service application, which now allows you basically to hold quite a bit of data and find it faster. One of the most interesting server administration changes is now mini roles. Mini roles allows you to assign fractions of administration roles to your servers, both front end and back end, thereby reducing CPU utilization without having to have and standardizing all your servers on the roles specific to what you want them to have. Also, they've bundled Microsoft Project Server into 2016. While you still have to have a specific client license for Project Server, it's now no longer a separate installation. It's fully integrated into SharePoint. And from an administration standpoint, specifically for on-premise, patching has been fixed so that you do not have to cycle your servers after you've patched your SharePoint installation. One of the challenges for getting your patches in consistently with SharePoint was having to figure out downtime so that you could then patch your servers and make sure that they were all up to date. And one of the last things is enhanced PowerShell scripts. They've added over 100 more commands to help you manage SharePoint from the command level. But the thing we're really excited about is the new hybrid solutions that Microsoft is putting together with on-prem and the cloud. One of the challenges originally with SharePoint is you really had to have one or the other. You had to pick on-premise or you had to pick the cloud. Now you can bring the two together and sort of combine the best of both worlds or ease your migration path from on-premise to the cloud. One of the biggest enhancements is now the cloud hybrid search, which now allows you to index both your on-prem and your cloud data, so your employees now have a one-stop shop for searching. This also means that your OneDrive and your site features can all be combined between your on-prem and your cloud, and you can migrate in pieces from on-premise to the cloud solutions. Another change is durable links or permanent links for your documents. Previously, you were stuck with whatever URL and location your document was at, and if it moved, that means your URL changed. You now have permanent URLs that follow that document no matter where it lives. Timer jobs have been increased. We now have over 200 plus timer jobs that help you manage SharePoint, and you also have more robust SharePoint logging so that you can figure out what's going on as your users are using the system.
So SharePoint 2016's goal is really to bridge Office 365 with on-premise installations for those who can't put everything into the cloud. So now you know, or you know more now. You're also seeing some of the great features in 2016. So really migrating to 2016 is got a lot of benefit based on a lot of the features, but is the timing really right? So what we're going to do now is talk about some criteria to really help you decide, because of course one size doesn't fit all. So the first set of things to think about is what is your current SharePoint status? You know, are you already heavily invested in SharePoint? Where are you in your life cycle? What version of SharePoint are you currently running? Have you just migrated to 2013 and only stuck your toe into the shallow end of Office 365? Or maybe you weren't using Office 365 at all. And if that's the case, then maybe it's not a good time to take on a massive effort. Another consideration is what kind of Microsoft licensing contract do you currently have, and when does it expire? If you're early on in a five-year subscription, you need to actually time this upgrade. Another thing to consider is how much customization have you actually done to SharePoint. Customization using farm solutions and custom web parts has been deprecated and not supported in the cloud. So if you're running code locally that you won't be able to run in the cloud, that's a big consideration from a development perspective. The next area is really about costs. You know, what is your budget? You know, for many organizations, the cost of what it takes to set up SharePoint is a real consideration. And it may be capital or maybe operating, but those all feed into your budgetary review of the timing of this. On-premise, of course, includes additional software costs with SQL, hardware costs, and obviously staff support costs at a minimum. SharePoint Online, being part of your Office 365, is billed monthly per user. So again, depending on where you are, those cost considerations may help you make some determination. Finally, where are you in your overall IT purchase cycle? You know, how much are you currently paying for your licenses? And where are you in that upgrade? Another thing to think about, and this has as much cultural organizational consideration as anything else, is how comfortable is your organization with being in the cloud? You know, what is your Microsoft Suite strategy? Obviously, more and more software companies are moving to a subscription-based model, and Microsoft has done the same with Office. So are you ready to do that? The next issue is, what's your company's culture relating to controlling your data? Where are your backups? How do you manage ownership of data? Do you operate in countries that control your ability to export data? So the actual data being in the cloud could be a real consideration for some organizations. Next is looking at your IT department. What's your allocation of IT resources? Do you have resources that can really support and manage hardware and software that run the on-premise solution? And really, how much of your IT staff do you want to devote to Microsoft and SharePoint? Many will reasonably argue that keeping hardware and systems up and running might not be the best use of IT. It might be better to have those resources deployed to actually solving business problems that help you run your organization. So one of the big advantages of going with the cloud solution is really offloading some of that IT investment. So we've kind of talked about some of the criteria, and we're really going to go through two different ways to kind of figure out how to determine if these apply to you. So first we'll just go through some really quick scenarios. So you skip the 2013 upgrade, and that means that you have been on since 2010. So now might be a really good time to look at upgrading. Maybe you have lots of customizations. If that's the case, then many of these customizations, as we talked about, are deprecated in the cloud model, and so maybe you just ought to stick with on-premise. Maybe you already have SharePoint 2013 and you're pretty happy with it. Maybe setting up a hybrid solution, though, with your SharePoint installation would be a way to start dipping your toe in and start looking at some cloud considerations. Maybe you move some team sites or departmental sites into the SharePoint Online model. We have one client who is in the process of a multi-year rollout across the globe with Office 365, and as part of that, they're taking advantage of the SharePoint Online for team sites. As part of that, it's just the team site portion that's online. They've kept their base intranet and all of its sensitive information in an on-premise solution. So that's a good example of a hybrid. Another thing that we've seen happen a lot is SharePoint implementations often grow organically, and that might result in a pretty messy information organization. You might have long lists of menus. We've seen this many times. And after some amount of time, you sort of realize that things are no longer findable. Even with a really good search, you want a logical front-end index into your content. So maybe it's time for a new site organization. Spinning up a SharePoint Online and doing some testing and starting to set up your new information organization there can be a really nice way to get it going, and then start migrating content over time. Another way we thought about looking at this was what we'll call this decision tree. I kept trying to make it a chutes and ladders, but I didn't really play that game enough, so I couldn't figure that out. But the idea is in the green up at the top is where you are in your current SharePoint investment and what kinds of things should you think about. So we'll just go through these real quickly one at a time. You don't have SharePoint, you don't have Office 365. If you're not interested in it, you're probably not even at this webinar, so let's assume you are, then great. It's a great time. You can get a really affordable way in to trying this technology and software solution set out. Let's say you're at the other end of the spectrum and you've already got Office 365 with 2013. So go ahead, upgrade to 2016, test your customizations. As you know, the smaller the leap in terms of versions, the easier the conversion. That's just true in most software. Let's say you have 2007. The end of life for 2007 is going to be next year, so it's probably time to start thinking about an upgrade. Let's say you've got 2013, and again, as we talked before, if it's a recent upgrade, then maybe you want to just stick with it and you don't want to do anymore. But if it's been a while, then now's probably a good time. So this is where we move into the actual considerations that you should be thinking about. We talked a lot about budget. If budget's not available, that's a showstopper. If it is, but you've got lots of customization, then you're going to have to either you're going to stick with on-premise, you're going to have to start very slowly and think about a big investment in doing some conversion. If you've got highly sensitive data and you're risk averse, stay on-premise. If you've got a big group of IT resources and they're plentiful, then you can probably look at not only staying on-premise, but starting to look at hybrid. So hybrid will really let you test out some things. If you don't have customization, you don't have highly sensitive data, and you don't have very many resources, then give the pure online model a try. So these are some of the things that we've thought about to really help you maneuver the decision. So what SharePoint strategy is right for you? The answer is it's going to depend. It depends on your status, on your goals, on your budget, and on your timing. So what we'd like to do now is pause and see if there are any particular questions that we can answer. Are you ready to plot out your SharePoint strategy? What can we do to help? So I'm just going to give it a minute. Oh, here's one question. How much for the online? So Office 365 with SharePoint Online is going to be somewhere between $8 and $12 per month per person per month, I guess is how they do it, PPPM. And that's going to depend on whether or not you have Exchange in the model. If you have Exchange, it's going to be on the higher end of that. If you don't, it's going to be on the lower end of that. But as you can see, for a small to medium-sized company, that can be a very affordable way to go. Questions? Don't be shy. Okay, I think this one is going to be for you, Tony. Okay, so they've obviously got SharePoint. So is an employee's personal OneDrive included in a centralized detection for in-place hold policies? First of all, maybe you can tell us what that question means.
What I believe the person's asking is that when you have a OneDrive scenario in the cloud environment, the person's MySite and OneDrive are combined together. And previously, it was basically a standalone island. You didn't have a lot of control over that except file sizes and how much space they were using. Now with 2016, the answer is basically yes to their question. When you apply your centralized deletion policies and in-hold place policies, those are also applied to the personal OneDrives of those users in the cloud. So now you have much more control over what's being stored on the cloud environment and can control those documents at a higher centralized level.
Okay, it looks like we've got one more question. This person has 2013. Okay, so this is a good question. So they have 2013. The question is about migration. Do you recommend moving? Can I just basically move my site collections en masse, or do I have to do those individually?
That's a good question, and again, the answer depends. And it depends on how nested your subsites are. Do you have a very, very tall pyramid, or do you have a very flat pyramid? Best practices currently for Microsoft in the cloud is to create as many site collections as you can versus trying to create nested subsites and create one site collection that holds a lot of subsites. So you want to flatten your structure out in the cloud. This is mostly due to indexing and resource utilization. So if you have a very flat structure already, you can use some migration tools to migrate en masse, or you can use those same migration tools to take parts of your site collections and migrate them to their own site, you should say subsites within the site collection and migrate them to their own site collections. So if you want an analysis on that, send us a note and we'll be happy to help you out.
Great. So I don't see any more questions. So I just got confirmation on that. So I'm going to say thank you very much for your time today. Our next monthly webinar will be the first Tuesday of June, which is June 7th. It'll be the same time, 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Eastern time. Look in your inbox for what our topic is next week. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.